Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Business News, Politics and Policy Briefing. Please welcome to the stage your MC, Editor Mark Beyer.
Good morning everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to have you all here this morning. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Noongar people, and acknowledge their elders, past and present. At the beginning of this year, Business News launched a new event series, Politics and Policy. It's designed to provide a platform to address and inform the business community about policies and key issues that affect our state. Already we've heard from Treasurer Ben Wyatt, Minister Rita Saffioti, and National Party leader Mia Davies. And today we're pleased to have the Premier, the Honourable Mark McGowan, as our guest. On behalf of Business News, I'd like to formally welcome you, Premier, and we look forward to hearing from you this morning. I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to the many business leaders and ministers in attendance this morning. I'd like to acknowledge our partners who've helped to make today's event possible. Thank you to Buckby Contracting, Bupa, Fortescue Metals Group, Murdoch University, Valrada and Westpac. Thank you to our venue partner, the Hyatt Regency Perth, and to our staging partner, PAV Complete Event Solutions. Thanks again for your support. Now, we have two door prizes on offer this morning. Courtesy of the Hyatt Regency Perth, we have an overnight stay in a newly appointed club room, including breakfast for 2 guests. And with thanks to Calnegia Family Vineyards, our second prize is a bottle of Rosabrook 2015 Single Vineyard Estate Cabernet Sauvignon. If you haven't had the chance to put your business cards in the box, we'll have staff coming around this morning. And we'll draw the names of the lucky winners in about half an hour. Now, this morning, the Premier will make a short address and then we'll have a Q&A session with our politics columnist, Peter Kennedy. There'll be an opportunity for you in the audience to submit questions. It'll be via the Slido platform on your smartphones. All the details about how to use that are on the brochure on your table program on page 3. Also on your table, you'll see copies of a wellness feature that we completed recently in partnership with Bupa. Please have a look at that. Lots of useful information that I think you'll enjoy reading. Now, before we break for breakfast, I'd like to touch on another initiative launched by Business News this year. Regular readers will know that we've been running a monthly series called Great for the State. It's been an opportunity to highlight the people, the trends, the industries that have shaped Western Australia and are creating opportunities for the future. To celebrate this year's Great for the State series and to mark the launch of a similar series in 2020, we're hosting a special lunch early next year on Friday the 7th of February. The confirmed speakers so far include Wesfarmers Chairman Michael Chaney and the brand agency's Steve Harris, and we'll have further announcements very soon. If you can turn your attention to the screens, we have prepared a short snapshot of Great for the State. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the breakfast and the good company. I'll be back around 8 o'clock. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've been enjoying your breakfast and the good company. We're going to get things underway now with the draw of the door prizes. Winners, if you can please see one of our event staff after the event to collect your prize. Karen, if you'd like to come up, we've got 2 draws this morning. The winner of the overnight stay for 2 here at the Hyatt Hotel. There we go. Nick Pollock from K2 Fly. Well done, Nick. And the winner of the Rosabrook wine from Kalnija Family Vineyards. There you go. Cav Tony Finney from Finney Group of Companies. So if you go and see Karen after the event, she'll look after you. Now, before we get underway, don't forget you can go on to slido.com and submit questions, and Peter Kennedy will seek to put them to the Premier later on. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Premier. Mark McGowan grew up in northern New South Wales, but he came to Western Australia as a young man to pursue a career with the Navy, and he's stayed here ever since. He was elected to the Legislative Assembly in 1996 and has been leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party since 2012. He was elected Premier in 2017, early that year, and that means it's only about 15 months until the next state election. So this morning we get to hear an update from the Premier on his plans and some of his challenges. Please join me in welcoming Premier Mark McGowan to the stage.
Thanks very much, Mark, for that very, very pithy and brief introduction. Thank you very much to Business News. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, their elders past and present. Can I acknowledge all the distinguished guests here this morning, but in particular, some of my parliamentary colleagues, the member for Armidale, Tony Butty, member for Balcatta, David Michael, and the member for Pilbara, Kevin Michelle, here this morning, and to all the members of the West Australian business community and government and the like that are here, thank you so much for coming. It is always great to talk to Business News. It's a publication that is very engaged in state politics and the state's economy. Whenever I get the Business News, I read it from the back. I go to Peter Kennedy's column on the inside cover. I'll just page back from the inside cover and go through, look for my name, and see if my name is there and see what he says about me. But it's always an interesting read, and I do appreciate the fact that Business News is so focused on ensuring Western Australia goes forward. This morning, I'd like to share with you some information about the direction of the West Australian economy, and also let you know at the end of my speech about a new initiative the government is taking to encourage investment and create new West Australian jobs. It is an important time, as always, for the West Australian economy. We realise and recognise that it has been a hard year for many in the community, whether they are people in the workforce, homeowners or small business owners. There have been some external headwinds that Western Australia, perhaps more than other states, has had to face. We face external challenges that no government has control over, no Australian government has control over. The trade wars between the United States and China, and considering Western Australia is the principal trading state of the nation and one of the major trading states of the world, they are a real danger to us. The uncertainty in Europe, in particular around what is going to happen with Britain. All the while, we deal with fluctuating commodity prices from iron ore to lithium. But since we came to government, over 50,000 new jobs have been created in Western Australia. But the unemployment rate is actually higher than we would prefer. The state has come out of recession, but we want economic activity, to be stronger. There has been a significant improvement in the mining sector, but we want the prosperity to flow through to the rest of the economy. But there are reasons for optimism, some very encouraging signs. In the tourism sector, Western Australia has had record numbers of out-of-state visitors over the last year. In fact, extraordinary growth in tourism numbers, interstate and international. In fact, Australia leading growth in international visitors. In retail, Western Australia has had its strongest quarter of growth since December 2014 and the highest growth rate in Australia. Business investment is returning to healthy pre-boom levels for many sectors of the economy, with a 6% rise in the June quarter. And importantly, population growth is trending upwards again and is now at its highest rate since December 2015. This month, the value of West Australian exports reached a record high. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Western Australia has exported $175.5 billion worth of goods in the last 12 months. That is a massive increase of nearly 30%, the highest annual growth since 2011. These are all reasons for cautious optimism about the state's economy. So in an economic environment like this, what is the proper role for a state government? I've always believed the government, for the most part, should let business do what it does, so long as it's in the public interest. Ultimately, economic activity and job creation will come from the private sector. But government should do what it can do to help that along. In these economic headwinds, we must set the rules and regulations to encourage activity in Western Australia and ensure that taxpayers' money is spent wisely. Whether that is ensuring our procurement comes from ethical sources, or ensuring that when the West Australian government spends money, it benefits West Australian businesses to a greater degree. Essentially, that the state government, as much as possible, buys locally. That's an area that we've spent a lot of time on since coming to government. From the WA Jobs Bill to Industry Link and our local content advisor network across every region. And I can tell you the early data we're getting back on the increases in local content from government procurement is very, very encouraging. Finally, and possibly most importantly, the state government can encourage finally and possibly most importantly is that we encourage confidence throughout the economy. Confidence for people to consume, for confidence for businesses to invest and hire. As the government, we can foster that confidence in three ways. Firstly, by getting our own house in order, by getting our finances back on track. Secondly, when the finances are back in order, making targeted, sensible moves to stimulate the state's economy, whether through capital investment or tax relief. And thirdly, by the state retaining strong relationships with our trading partners, considering Western Australia is the trading state of the nation. I'm very happy to tell you all today that under this government, the budget is back in black, thanks to the hard work, lots of hard work and restraint from each of my cabinet ministers. It's difficult to overstate to you all just how drastic the improvement has been. We inherited a set of finances where debt was rapidly rising in Western Australia to $44 billion. There were deficits forecast each and every year for the foreseeable future. On winning government, we were informed that the set of books we inherited included unallocated savings from the previous government. That is, assumed cuts in each agency without actually deciding what was going to be cut. Then within a few weeks, Treasury came to us advising of a $5 billion write-down in revenue. Needless to say, it was pretty bleak and pretty difficult. So we've had to make some hard decisions and some tough decisions to deal with that. Things you may not have heard of, or even things that you may have forgotten. We froze the pay of every senior executive, every judge, and every politician in Western Australia for 4 years to set an example. We reduced the number of government departments in Western Australia from 41 to 26, a 40% reduction. We introduced a firm but fair wages policy that we have stuck with from day one. We made hard choices about selling the TAB and commercialising Landgate's automated land titling system. After 2 years, and after some very tough decisions in budget management, spending restraint across the board, I can now tell you that Western Australia is financially back on track. It's underpinned by the fact that we are keeping spending low, with growth in spending this year of 1.5%. That compares with annual average growth under the previous government of 6.4%. So in other words, what's that? Something 400% greater or thereabouts under the last government. Because of that spending restraint, WA is already in significant surplus. The first one in 5 years, years and years ahead of schedule, with surpluses projected across each year and every one of the forward estimates. This means that debt can now head down. We're going to be reducing debt by billions across the forward estimates. Billions and billions. But more importantly, debt is already billions of dollars lower than it was projected to be when we came to office. That's a lot of numbers and a lot of moving parts. But all you really need to know is one simple thing. We, Western Australia, is the only state in Australia, the only state or territory in Australia where debt is going down. Every other one, debt is going up, bar us. Our financial performance hasn't gone unnoticed, with WA achieving credit rating upgrades, putting us back on the path to a AAA rating. In fact, our ratings upgrades means we save millions and millions of dollars each year on interest payments, showing that there is a dividend, an actual real financial dividend for good financial management. By turning things around, getting our house in order, by showing the world that we are a sensible, stable jurisdiction to do business in, we give confidence back to the economy. I did see on Monday the latest NAB business survey showed business confidence in Western Australia is the highest in the country, considerably higher than New South Wales, and business conditions in WA are second only to New South Wales and considerably higher than the Australian average. This kind of result gives us the confidence to keep on going with the program we are currently. Our improved financial position is not just an end in itself. Our conservative estimates and careful budgeting means we now have the capacity to reinvest in a targeted way in job creation. Reinvest in Western Australians. Over the past month, the government has announced 5 key stimulus measures to boost the economy and create local jobs, worth over $500 million. Each of these measures were designed to have the biggest bang for the taxpayer's buck, targeting key areas of the economy. Firstly, I announced a month ago $280 million of spending to immediately ramp up school and hospital maintenance across the state. Just last week, every public school in Western Australia received the first wave of funds in their bank accounts to undertake extra works. That means essentially that tradies, small and medium-sized enterprises all over Western Australia, because every school and virtually every hospital will receive this support, will now be engaged to undertake essential work on roofs, floors, painting, plumbing, whatever it may be, electrical work. So there's an immediate boost to those businesses all over Western Australia, and it's delivered directly and immediately, which is very, very important. Secondly, there's our 75% stamp duty rebate for purchasing apartments off the plan. That's designed to get new projects off the ground much, much sooner, creating and supporting construction jobs that come with those projects. It's essential, of course, that we also have the skills necessary for the jobs we're going to need people to do, which is why, thirdly, we made the decision to drastically reduce TAFE fees on key priority courses. For example, someone doing a Cert 3 in civil construction will be paying essentially a third of what they would have compared to 2017. In fact, half of what it would have been, it's half of what it was in 2013 before the big fee increases. For these priority courses, especially for concession students, it's never been more affordable to study at TAFE. If anyone in the audience today knows a young man or woman considering their options for a career, let them know that TAFE has never been a better option to get in there, get some training and have a go at a career. These TAFE courses are about ensuring that West Australians are job ready for the jobs that are coming. In the areas of construction, defence, NDIS, tourism. They're the ones that we have cut the fees to try and encourage West Australians in so they can take advantage of the jobs that we know are coming to Western Australia. And of course, then there's the big change we made last week. Payroll tax relief. We always said we would look at payroll tax when our finances allowed it. Now we have the fiscal capacity to be able to act. We'll be raising the tax-free threshold twice. From January 1, 2020, the government will be raising the threshold from $850,000 to $950,000. Then on January 1, 2021, we will raise it again to $1 million. These changes will result in 1,000 businesses in Western Australia no longer having any liability, and a further 11,000 will have their payroll tax bills cut. This means small and medium businesses will have a lower tax burden, and more incentive to hire, and more funds available to reinvest. Not to mention the confidence back in the West Australian economy. This full suite of 5 commitments, made possible by our good financial management, represents the most targeted, effective investment possible in our state's economy and in West Australian jobs. Now, I said 3 main things the state government can do. Thirdly, and incredibly importantly, the state needs to keep good relationships with our major trading partners. Western Australia is the major trading state of Australia. In the past 12 months, Western Australia, with 11% of the population, represents over 45% of the nation's exports. 11% of the population, nearly 50% of the nation's exports. We are, as I said, the major trading state of Australia. Keeping strong relations with China, Japan, Korea, India, the United States and Britain is fundamental to our prosperity. They buy our products and they invest in our state. That's why myself and my ministers have visited each of them since we came to office. In fact, since I became Premier, I visited China on 3 separate occasions. In the case of China, fully one quarter of our state's economy, and therefore our state's jobs, depend upon that one trading relationship. As I said, that's why I visited on 3 separate occasions. It's up to the state to keep the relationship strong when the Commonwealth fails to do so. The commentary from some of our federal government figures, particularly Mr Dutton and Mr Hastie, is quite simply destructive to West Australian jobs and to West Australian confidence. It's up to the state to ensure that we keep that strong relationship going so we keep that investment, jobs and market available to our state. All of this, financial management, tax cuts, the international relationships are incredibly important. It's not the limit of what we can do to help the state economy. Some of the most effective things we can do for the people in Western Australia comes from changing our own mindsets. We can achieve things for Western Australia by changing the way we do business in government. It comes from changing the way WA engages with the Commonwealth Government to secure billions and billions and billions for new infrastructure and for the GST repair job. It comes from having the courage to undertake reform, like properly deregulating the taxi industry, fixing our planning and our strata laws. And as I said, engaging with the Commonwealth has paid dividends. They might be of a different political complexion to me, but I always thought working cooperatively achieves outcomes, and that's what we secured. Money for road, rail, hospitals, and also the GST as a consequence of working together. It comes from having the work ethic to secure important policy outcomes. An example is more direct flights to Perth from Tokyo and now from Shanghai and hopefully in the future from India. which have helped to underscore our record tourism outcomes. But some of the most important improvements don't involve more spending. They don't involve dollars at all. All it takes is a change of thinking from government. It's that change of mindset from government when we ask ourselves, do we really need to do this? Which leads to red tape reduction. Or it's the critical mindset that asks, are we putting our best foot forward for the state, as a state, especially when it comes to trade and attracting investment? So, is WA putting its best foot forward to attract investment? Since coming to government and seeing the apparatus of the state we inherited, I don't believe we have been putting our best foot forward. That's why we condensed the number of government agencies, to make them work more effectively together. When it comes to creating trade and investment opportunities for Western Australia, my opinion is Western Australia has not historically been aggressive enough. We have relied for so long on our major resource projects for our prosperity. That is, we have rested on our laurels. I can understand why. When you're blessed with resources, your leverage is what is in the ground, and you make them come to you. Our departments and our policies reflected that attitude. When it came to facilitating investment in Western Australia, our model was essentially the old Department of State Development. You let the BHPs, the Rios, the Chevrons of the world come to you. If the project was seen to be significant enough size to warrant government attention, state development would then be the project's one point of call and shepherd them through the approvals process and the eventuating state agreement. It was a good model for those kinds of projects, with the department acting as a stable navigator through the process, allowing those major projects to get up. But it was inherently reactionary. State development didn't go out there looking or hunting for investors or for projects. It didn't seek investment, nor did it have an appetite for anything that wasn't resources-based, and even then, it had to be of a specific large size. It relied on high commodity prices to bring investors to us. That model, that attitude, is not appropriate for Western Australia as we move into the next decade. Those functions still exist, as the old DSD is now part of my Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, and they will always have a role to play. But it's time to do something new for Western Australia, actively seeking out and facilitating investment in this state. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to announce today the establishment of Invest and Trade WA. Invest and Trade WA is a new unit inside the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, which will take responsibility across government for promoting WA as a destination for investment and the facilitation of that investment, while also assisting West Australian businesses in accessing trade opportunities overseas. Invest and Trade WA will draw on and work with a vast array of government institutions that already engage in this space, from the government's network of overseas trade offices to our regional development commissions across the state, as well as federal agencies like Austrade and DFAT. Invest and Trade WA will present a single front door to those interested in investing in Western Australia, both a physical front door and a digital front door. Invest and Trade WA will ensure that investors are well managed through whatever processes they need to navigate. You see, Invest and Trade WA has been quietly set up in the background, getting things established and starting to assist interested parties. It has already fielded over 70 inquiries, and it's looking very promising. I'll give you one example. An international customer service centre made an inquiry seeking assistance with investigating location options outside the immediate Perth CBD. This particular provider has a focus on training and providing opportunities to unemployed West Australians. Their proposals entail 500 jobs if it goes ahead. Invest and Trade WA pulled together a project team across the relevant agencies. From there, they reached out to local governments, ensuring that issues like parking and building approvals could be handled in a coordinated and efficient manner, as well as 2 TAFE campuses regarding training support in order to maximise the opportunity for West Australians in this centre, as well as ensuring that the training they receive supports their career progression. Negotiations are ongoing, but we're hoping to get a good outcome. Instead of resting on our laurels, waiting for things to rock up on our doorstep, making them navigate our systems blindly, we're going on the front foot, chasing opportunities and rolling out the red carpet for these sorts of projects, for whoever wants to invest in our great state. Ultimately, Invest and Trade WA represents an idea at the heart of the government, that the old ways will not cut it. We restored our budget by showing restraint and making difficult decisions, not hoping that the finances will just fix themselves. We've stimulated the economy by making the right targeted investments in West Australians. We don't build monuments to ourselves. We will aggressively chase opportunities for West Australians, would not just wait around for prosperity to fall into our laps. As Premier, in closing, as Premier, I want to continue to get our state back on track, and I want to set ourselves up for long-term success for us, our children and our grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Premier, for that very wide-ranging and informative address, and a very interesting note on which to end. And so can I just ask you first up about Invest and Trade WA, if there are guests in the audience this morning who have a start-up or want to expand and have been having some trouble with finance or regulations or whatever, what could Invest and Trade WA do for them?
It's about attracting investment to Western Australia. So if you have a significant... Well, firstly, thanks, Peter. Thanks for interviewing me, and I hope my kind comments to you at the start mean that you're kind in return.
Well, I hope you'll still be of that view when we finish.
I've always found with journalists being nice doesn't always work. Look, it's about attracting investment to the state. So it's about ensuring that if you've got a project, an idea that is of some significance, it doesn't have to be a Mount Whaleback or a Northwest Shelf, but something of significance that might be also be outside of the ordinary things that government that Western Australia is known for. You have a front door to come in and say, we've got this amount of capital we want to invest in this sort of project. Can you help us? And so the Department of Jobs, Science and Innovation has a portal and also a direct contact point so that opportunity is available. So it's not just about you want to build a house, you go to them and say, give me some help in getting my house approved. It's about projects of significance to get them through and make sure it happens. The anecdote, when we came to government, I gave the department this anecdote that I'd heard constantly over my time in opposition, and that was this. South Australia allegedly has a system by which if you want to invest in South Australia, projects 20, 30, whatever it might be, $1 million, you can actually contact them. They will ensure people are there to meet you when you arrive at the airport. If it's of significant size, the minister will be there with a car and take you to an office and sit down and hear about it and then get the relevant public servants in and the like. Now, I don't know if that is apocryphal or not, but I heard it so many times, I said to the agency, I want us to do at least something similar to that, rather than our traditional model is just sit back and let it all happen for us. So that's what Invest and Trade is about. It's a start on heading down that model so that we're far more attractive and far more engaged with those who want to invest in our state.
You might be taking on extra responsibility because I think that's the sort of thing that Charlie Court used to do in the 60s and the 70s, including meeting leaders at the airport. So I know it's a long trip from Rockingham to the airport, but maybe it happens. Premier...
it won't be a long trip when we move the airport to Rockingham.
Premier, the International Customer Service Centre that you referred to, that's in discussion, what more can you tell us about it? How close to fruition is it?
And the best, what I told you on my address is what I know. So they are looking at a opportunity outside the city. These things are around because sometimes they offshore, sometimes they onshore these things. It's eastern states. The last of my advice was it's an eastern states company. They're looking for a site somewhere outside the CBD, but preferably in the city. So we have given them a range of options on sites that are out there that we know are relatively empty and might have relatively affordable rent, particularly in areas where there is high levels of unemployment. So there is a couple of, off the top of my head, I gave them a couple of sites that I know are available. I don't want to reveal which they are because people might object.
You're not suggesting that it's at Rockingham?
No. Well, yeah, one site was. One site was, which is fairly unoccupied. So there's a couple of sites we've suggested to them, and as I said, there's a team of people working with them. Because 500 jobs is, it's not a Northwest Shelf, but it's still pretty big.
So there's a possibility also to as an attraction, perhaps a state government incentive, some concessions, a tax break or whatever, to encourage the development?
Yeah, well, generally we don't do tax breaks, but generally getting people through the processes. And also it's generally about finding a site and getting approvals done. The state's taxes are fairly limited, and generally for an investor, they're pretty similar around the country, so it doesn't make a huge amount of difference around the country. But it's about finding a site often, and it's about getting them through the approvals processes and making them feel welcome. Now
Premier, do you speak frequently with the Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg?
No. The Treasurer does.
I asked that question. I asked that question because you might have seen the reports this morning that Mr. Frydenberg is making a speech today, and in his speech he is urging the states to be more aggressive, and apparently he singles out Western Australia and the need to be more aggressive about attracting business and not to rely on Commonwealth handouts.
Look, okay, I didn't know he was singling us out, but as I outlined to you in my speech, we do actually have the highest levels of business confidence in Australia. You may have seen recently in the press some commentary by myself about attracting, investment in Browse and Scarborough, the two big offshore projects to the state. Last year, for instance, I went to the United States and essentially worked with the company Albemarle to come and establish themselves in Kemerton, which is 1,000 jobs in lithium. I mean, we do that sort of thing all the time. And we've had some considerable success, and we're certainly hoping for more. We're currently, for instance, seeking from the Commonwealth the submarine maintenance program here in Western Australia. So the Collins-class submarines literally sail from HMAS Stirling at Garden Island, around the top of Garden Island, past Rottnest, past Cape Lewin, across the Great Australian Bight to Adelaide to get what's called their full cycle docking done. And that's very debilitating for the crews and frankly stupid. And so we're currently working with the Commonwealth, or trying with the Commonwealth, to get them to do the full cycle docking done here at Kwinana or Henderson. And that would be about $1 billion injection of jobs into the state each year. So, we are out there actually hunting work. Now, when it comes to Commonwealth handouts, so to speak, be fair to say other states have been pretty aggressive in obtaining Commonwealth money over the years. I spent the first 2 years of my time as Premier using, I suppose, the leverage of a state Labor victory in a state that was traditionally regarded as a conservative state to ensure that we got most benefit from that. So my first meeting with Malcolm Turnbull within a week of becoming Premier, laid out for him maps of all our rail lines and what he could invest in, and subsequently we got billions of dollars for those, billions and billions of dollars for those. Laid out maps of roads and what they could invest in. We got billions and billions of dollars of those. Then continued the dialogue around GST. We got a GST fix, if you like, of 75-cent floor. So, I suppose we did pretty well over those couple of years with getting money out of the Commonwealth, but we also do hunt private sector investment, as I said.
You did mention submarines. How confident are you that Western Australia will win the submarine maintenance contract, because South Australia doesn't want to give it up?
No, as I said in Parliament, the South Australian Premier wouldn't know a submarine from a limousine or a periscope from a stethoscope. But
well, they build them and we don't.
Yeah, but my point stands. But But they, look, if it's done on merit, they'll come here. So industry here is far more sophisticated, far better, and far more, if you like, private sector oriented. So we are, our shipbuilding and our oil and gas industries and the like are world competitive. Adelaide is totally focused on just winning Commonwealth contracts. That's all they do. So they did actually get the frigate contract, they got the new submarine builds, they're going to be massive spends, and also very, very demanding on what is South Australia's very limited industry base. So in order to ensure that our Collins-class submarines will remain operational for at least the next 15 years, which they will have to, they should actually make a decision in the national interest to get them fixed where there is less impediment on, or less impact, which of course all the shipbuilding in Adelaide would have on that project, and also where it's most logical to do it, which is clearly WA. I'll give us a 50-50 chance. How soon do you expect a decision? They said December. So they told us, so the Minister for Defence Issues, Paul Papalia, and I, he's an ex-Navy diver, he's been to Canberra, we've presented a business case, we've presented an Ernst & Young appraisal, we've presented all sorts of things to them to give them the confidence to come to WA, and we've also allocated some money for maintenance, for some capital upgrades down at Henderson, so that everything is right for them to bring them here. So we're hopeful they'd bring them here for 2024, and at a pinch 2026, but if they do, that's a very big project for WA. Premier, a question from the floor, and keep them coming in, please, keep them coming in. What initiatives are you currently considering to kickstart the state economy? I thought that was my speech. Okay. Can you just... I can read it out again if you like. 1, 2 and 3. Oh, okay, well, payroll tax cuts, stamp duty cuts, major maintenance spend on schools and hospitals, extraordinary training program, and as I said, submarines, Scarborough and Browse, which between them are sort of single project, they are single project stimulus packages if we can secure those two. So, there's a bunch of things right there. We're also later this month and and next month going to start work on 4 rail lines. 4 rail lines. So we're going to be building in Perth for the first time in history 4 rail lines at once. Which of course is billions of dollars of investment. As I said, a lot of it we got out of the Commonwealth, so we're very happy with that. And we're going to be building rail cars. We'll start work on the rail car manufacturing facility in Midland. For the first time in 30 years, we'll be building rail cars in Western Australia. So what's that, about 10? How long will it take for these initiatives to have an impact though? Well, if you start building rail lines next month, they'll start having an impact next month. I'm alluding to the issue of employment, I guess, Premier. And at the election, you promised jobs, jobs, jobs. Unemployment's been among the highest in the country for the last 2 years. It's still high, well above the national average, 5.7 to 5.1. When do you think you can get it down to the national average? So when we came to office, unemployment was 6.4%. It's now 5.7. So it's come down by whatever that is, 0.7%. We now have the 3rd lowest unemployment rate in the country, so New South Wales has the lowest, Victoria next, and we are 3rd. It's higher than the territories. No, ACT and Northern Territory. Yeah. As well. Okay, well, ACT, they just go and work for the Commonwealth. But in any event, of the states, we are the 3rd lowest of the states. When we came to office, we were the highest of the states. But in any event, obviously we need to do more. That's what the theme of my speech and everything we're doing to attract investment is all about. As I said, I was in India last week, and Kevin Brown's here from the airport, promoting West Australian industry, direct flights from India, international students. We do that sort of thing all the time. There's no magic solutions to it, just long, hard grind, getting projects off the ground, attracting investment, doing the sorts of things that I outlined we've been doing. Can you get it down to the national average by election time, 15 months, as Mark Beyer reminded us? Well, obviously, the national average is a little bit skewed because New South Wales, for some reason, has a much lower unemployment rate than everyone else. So that sort of skews it in a downward direction. But of the states, we are 3rd, so we have a lower unemployment rate than South Australia, Queensland or Tasmania. All right, another question from the floor.
Mining. Mining takes about 2 years to hit the domestic economy. Is there more support coming for residential construction to maintain our pipeline of workers and trades ahead of mining?
Okay. Well, we announced the stamp duty initiative recently. Residential really requires population growth, which means you require jobs. If you've got jobs, you get population growth. People come from interstate, like I did, or overseas. And so that boosts the housing market. The housing market, I think, went through a fairly a huge boom, as we know, over the 10 or 12 years up till 2015 or thereabouts. And then obviously, the projects went from construction into production. And so that reduced the demand for housing, yet there was a very big industry significantly geared up. So what we've done, as I said, is the initiative we took the other day with stamp duty. We did the Keystart initiative. Western Australia is the only state in Australia that has, in effect, a state government bank. So Keystart has now lifted its eligibility criteria so that you can get a loan from Keystart with a much higher income. So many more people are now eligible. So we're considering extending that, and that consideration will happen shortly. And that will mean that the problems with getting finance through the traditional banking sector are overcome to a degree in Western Australia because we are using Keystart to do that. So we have the highest level of first home buyers of anywhere in the country because of Keystart. And Keystart, because we've lifted the income thresholds, means that more people will be eligible. So we're doing a lot of things, and Peter Tinley, the Minister, is doing all sorts of METRONET projects around rail lines, around train stations, all sorts of joint equity projects with private sector investors and the like. But, population growth will help. And as I said in my speech, highest population growth in like 4 or 5 years now.
And on the issue of growth, there's constant comment about wage growth and the fact that inflation's low, wage growth is low, and that it's suggested that if wage increases were bigger, then that might stimulate the economy as well. But you made the point in your address about the wage freeze in the public sector. More than 100,000 West Australians affected by that. You also made the point that the budget is in the black after some fairly tough measures. Isn't it time that you released the strictures on spending and perhaps public sector wages as well, including your own?
That'd go well. So we had what we did in 2017, we legislated a 4-year wage freeze for senior public servants, for judges and for politicians. So no increase in salary or allowances at all. So that's 4 years. It'll be whatever it was in 2017, it'll be the same in 2021, 2022. So that set an example. Because of the runaway finances, we set an example of us, and then we went to the public sector and we said, our policy is going to be $1,000 wage rises a year for 4 years. And whenever your agreement comes up, it's $1,000 for 4 years. So $1,000 a year for 4 years. So it wasn't a wage freeze on the public sector, but it was a very tight wages policy. The $1,000 for 4 years actually was better for people at the lower end than the upper end. So if you're a cleaner on $50,000 a year, $1,000 means a lot more to you than if you're an engineer or a doctor in a public hospital on $300,000 or $400,000 a year. So basically we thought was very fair, but it recognised the situation we're in. Look, if we let go of the wages policy, I think we let go of good financial management. So we're not letting go of the wages policy because that will mean the end of debt going down. And I want part of my legacy to be that we got the state back to a sustainable position, and we weren't sustainable before. So we're not going to let go of it, but I do understand the pressures on wages. Once the 4-year policy's up, we'll consider a new policy. But you've got to, in government, actually make sure you stand by what you say.
But on the question of the budget in the black, Mr Frydenberg's being criticised, or the federal government's being criticised for being too focused on getting the federal budget back into balance when some of the suggestion is there should be stimulus at the federal level. Could the same criticism be made of you? You were more intent on getting the budget back into balance and debt down than perhaps jobs and consumer spending, consumer confidence.
Well, they have a much bigger balance sheet than us. So the Commonwealth's balance sheet is somewhere between $300 and $400 billion. Ours is about 30. So their capacity to pump prime the economy is much greater than ours. But what we are doing is, with the things I said in the speech, very targeted initiatives to create jobs. So whether it's the training initiatives or the spend in school maintenance, or whether it's the payroll tax relief, very targeted initiatives to do that. As I said, we're about to start 4 rail lines. We've got the biggest road build project in history. As I sort of said, we can do all that at the same time as driving down debt, because essentially we controlled recurrent expenditure, and also we got big Commonwealth injections over the first 2 years of my government to assist us with that.
Premier, a question from the floor on local content, and local content an issue in the big resource projects too, about some of those big structures being imported rather than made locally. But the question on local content says, local content needs legislative support. What new laws will you pass to ensure local content is maximised?
Well, thank you for that. We passed what's called the Local Jobs Bill in 2018 for state government spend. So when state government builds a courthouse or a hospital, or Water Corporation invests in a water treatment plant, or a Port Authority builds a wharf, there's now requirements for giving fair and reasonable opportunities for local suppliers. And if a local supplier is selected, that has to be taken account of. And if a local supplier is selected, well then the conditions upon which they agree to in terms of local content are written into the contract. So that's now in place. We have, as I said, all sorts of local content advisors and the like out there across the regions, across the city, to assist bidders to obtain that work. When it comes to the private sector, what we're looking at bringing in next year is what's called the Skilled Local Jobs Bill. And the Skilled Local Jobs Bill is about making sure that there is a greater requirement to consider West Australia. You can't mandate, but to consider West Australian suppliers, training and the like when major projects are put in place. We don't want to discourage major projects, but we want to make sure we maximise the benefit of them.
Another question from the floor, Premier, to do with energy. Why has the government frozen the energy market reforms that commenced years ago, such as allowing customers to choose their own retailers?
Well, there was, forgive me, I don't think there was ever any, there was never any plan that we've frozen or anything like that to...
well, it's been stalled then, the progress has been
but
stalled.
there was never any commitment by anyone for full retail contestability for household customers. So if you go to full retail contestability for household customers, 2 things can potentially happen. One is synergy will bleed more money, and the state could be up for more money, more debt. Or secondly, it actually could have the converse impact, or the unexpected impact of actually pushing up prices, because what you find is if other operators want to enter the market, there's very significant costs associated with setting up billing systems and all sorts of stuff that they have to do. So there was never any intention by the last government to get to full retail contestability. We never committed to full retail contestability for those 2 reasons that you don't know in a very small market like Western Australia what might happen. Western Australia's electricity market is very complex and also very different, because we actually have a very small population with a very large area, and we actually subsidise from the city regional bills. So if you're living in Newman, or you're living in Warburton, your household electricity bill per unit is the same as someone living in Subiaco or living in Collie. So all of that complexity means that it needs to be managed very, very carefully, very, very carefully. And so that's why doing anything that can destabilise the system is something you want to be very careful about. The biggest actual, if you like, disruptor of the system in Western Australia is actually solar panels. The growth in solar is now at the level by which it is 1 additional coal-fired power station coming onto the grid each year. So I had to go down to Collie a couple of months ago and announce the closure of one of the coal-fired power stations, essentially because we don't need it anymore, because of all the solar. That's actually the big issue, how to manage that and how to manage the growth. And it's because it comes on at all times of the day when it's more sunny and the like, the destabilising impacts of that is the issue that governments need to manage.
A quick question on trade and investment, Premier, because time's tight. You were critical of Mr Dutton and Mr Hastie, and particularly with relation to China. But how delicate is that fine line in our trade with China, our major customer for iron ore? How delicate is that fine line between them as our major trading partner or customer and also the human rights issues which crop up with China?
Well, I don't object to the Commonwealth Government taking up human rights issues with China like they could take them up with any country. But, you know, to go public and call them Nazis or compare them to the German invasion of France in 1940 or to... as Mr Dutton sort of screamed at them publicly, is just stupid. It's ridiculous. It's not diplomacy, it's just immaturity. And so I don't object to those issues being taken up in subtle ways with China's leaders and the like, but doing it on Channel 7 News is not the way to do it. But I'll just make a broader point. I saw Mr Dutton said something like, they don't share our values. Well, lots of countries around the world have different governments, different systems, different versions of democracy, different values to Western Australia. In fact, I'd go so far as to say virtually every country does. So do we then say to every country around the world, we're not going to trade with you because you have a different set of values or a different set of different system of government to Australia? I just don't think that's a wise way of progressing these issues. And I don't think it's in the state's interest. And I think, you know, people in Queensland, New South Wales might be forgiven because, you know, they don't, you know, probably understand the relationship as important as it is for Western Australia. But for anyone in Western Australia, particularly at a senior level, not to understand that, I think is unforgivable.
And just closing, Premier, the big local issue of the last couple of months have been the voluntary assisted dying issue. How confident are you that talks will enable the legislation to be passed by Parliament in the next few weeks?
Well, I'm actually increasingly confident. I wouldn't say it's definite, but I'm increasingly confident. So just so you're all aware, the voluntary assisted dying bill, we started the process on that upon coming to government. Essentially, it's for people who are terminally ill in their last 6 months of life to be able to make a decision if they are in pain to end their suffering. And I've heard so many stories over the course of my life and also over the course of this process about families who've been through extreme events with their mums or dads or their brothers or sisters. And we wanted to make it easier for people to deal with that and allow people to make their own choice about their own future. Currently, of course, you know, some people's doctors help them on their way, other people's doctors don't. And so all we wanted to do was allow for people to decide for themselves whether or not they want to keep going in their last weeks and months of life if they're in pain. Now, the bill is now in the upper house. It got through the lower house very, very easily because there's overwhelming public support for it. It's in the upper house. Some MPs have put literally hundreds of amendments on the notice paper. They need to be dealt with quickly. And I think the upper house, I hope, will reflect the will of the people. I'm increasingly confident from what I hear that there is increasing support amongst MPs in the upper house. And I'd like to achieve this because I think it will be a great thing for all of us, were any one of us in that position in our last weeks or months of life.
Premier, time's beaten us. Would you please show your appreciation to Premier Mark McGowan for his address and questions. Thank you. Questions. We'll stay here. Thanks, Mark. And I'll pass you back to the editor of Business News, Mark Beyer.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Premier. Well, look, I think all of us here this morning have firstly got a bit of an insight into the extremely wide brief of issues that a Premier needs to be across. And we've only just touched on some of the social issues. So thank you, Premier, for giving us insight into some of the issues you're dealing with. We appreciate also the message of cautious optimism about the outlook for Western Australia. And we also thank you for choosing this forum to announce your new trade and investment initiative. We really appreciate that, so thank you once again. In closing, I'd like to once again acknowledge our event sponsors and thank them for their support. Details up on the screen. And I'll let you know about the next event coming up. Our last breakfast for the year will feature Rebecca Tompkinson, Chief Executive of the Royal Flying Doctor Service of WA. She'll wrap up our Success and Leadership series with a breakfast on November the 29th. Rebecca's got a great story to tell. It's a great organisation, and I hope many of you can join us then. And for all your business news, please go to our website, check our daily emails, check our magazine, and look forward to seeing you at future events. Once again, thank you for attending the event this morning, and I hope you have a very good day.